veteran. There we go. Graduate student and veteran panel today. We're having a little bit of lunch kind of technical difficulties, so I apologize for any of that. Today, I am very happy to have Paul Artel join us from the Rackham Graduate School. He's going to be moderating our panel. We have some wonderful people here today. One of her students who are at the University of Michigan, graduate students, but come from kind of all walks of life and represent different parts of the military and definitely different ranks. So we're happy to have everybody here to kind of share their stories. We're kind of under the numbers today. We should be able to have you ask questions after the event with your mics instead of just chat. Until our question and answer session is ready, please keep your mics muted so we don't get barking dogs, cats, doorbells, those kind of things, kids, those kind of things on our meet. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Paul and let him start the session.
Thanks, everyone. Welcome, and we're going to get going. As Phil said, if you have questions during this chat or during this panel, feel free to put those in the chat box for now, and we will. I'm moderating the box as well, so feel free, and we'll get to those questions later on in the presentation. But at this time, I would like to have each of our panelists introduce themselves. Now, Phil, you have slides of each of the panelists, so we're going to move that. Yep. All right. So Phil is going to put the slide up, and if your name comes up, so Julia, you're first. Tell us a little bit about yourself beyond these stats.
I'm Julia Coxon. I am a active duty colonel of 60 in the U.S. Army right now. I am here getting my PhD in operations research in the department, the Industrial and Operations Engineering Department over on North Campus. Normally. And in the Army, I typically serve in the role of a signal officer. My last job was as a battalion commander. And here going forward, when I graduate, I will be moving up to West Point to go be a professor in the Department of Systems Engineering up there. So, but thanks for having us. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you, Julia. Next slide, Phil. There we go. Stephanie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stephanie. I'm sorry, my dog is not having a nice time right now. Okay, so I was in the Air Force. I was active duty. I'm currently in the reserves. I'm a master sergeant. I'm an analyst for them, and I'm working on my master's in electrical and computer engineering, focusing on embedded systems and more focused on medical systems. I did my undergrad here as well.
Perfect, thank you. Michael.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Michael Hoffman. I am currently a doctoral candidate in the Joint Program in English and Education, working on a dissertation that is specifically about military culture and military service. I served for 9 years in the U.S. Army as both enlisted and then as an officer. And thanks to the GI Bill, this is actually my second time being a graduate student at U of M. I also got a master's in education a few years ago from here.
Thank you, Michael.
Hi, I'm Rob Call. I'm a graduate student over at Eastern and IPSI. I'm going for my MPA, for Master in Public Administration, with a focus on local government management. I was in the active duty Navy for about 4.5 years. And then from Michigan originally, we moved out to Arizona, and I got my undergrad from University of Arizona. And then we moved back to Michigan about 3-4 years ago.
Cool. Thanks, Rob.
Hey there, my name is Matt Preston. I'm enlisted from the Air Force, got out, went enlisted into the Army, and now I'm a JD candidate at the law school, and this is my last year.
Thank you, Matt. And we have one more. Phil, can we stop the slide share? We'll go into presenter mode here. But our last panelist, Michael, introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Bean. I'm an MBA student at U of M Flint. I did 6.5 years in the Marine Corps, combat engineer, been to Iraq, Afghanistan. And now I'm transitioning from a 7-year entrepreneur, looking to get into the private space because it turns out that the private space can pay me and give me better benefits than I can as an entrepreneur. But nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Michael. All right, so I have some questions for the panel and a couple things. Number one, as a panelist, we'll go free for all, at least for the first question. So just step up and try and answer. We'll see how that goes. And second, if there's a question you don't want to answer, you don't feel like you can add to, that's fine too. We have a few questions. And then once again, to everyone viewing today, make sure if you have additional questions or you want to piggyback on something that you heard or get more clarifications, put them in the chat box and we can incorporate that live into the actual discussion. But the first question is why you joined the military? Who wants to tackle that one?
Are you calling on us, Paul, or are we just volunteering?
We'll go volunteer. Let's try volunteer for this round.
Okay, well, so when I joined, I was in 10th grade for September 11th, and it was just one of those things where I believed in what we were doing and, quickly found myself with my head shaved at Paris Island and then to Iraq and Afghanistan to fight the good fight.
Yeah, I was also in 10th grade, I think, in 9/11. But I was going to Eastern at the time, and I was just having a lot of fun, but I wasn't really going anywhere in life and decided I needed a change. And I just called the Navy recruiter up, and then a couple months later, I was off to Great Lakes. And that was probably the best decision I ever made in my life. So.
Coincidentally, I was also in 10th grade when 9/11 happened, and kind of jarring actually. So I already knew I was going to go into the military. I'm part of a multi-generational military family, and so I kind of already had my eyes set on it. After I got out of the Air Force, though, I realized that that there were these education benefits that most people don't use, and so I went back in, in an ancillary purpose to pursue an education afterward.
Was anyone not in 10th grade?
Yeah, I was definitely not in 10th grade when 9/11 happened. I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina with the 82nd Airborne Division by that point already. So it tells you how old I am. But I would say that, I think everyone has a different experience in the military. And I've been extraordinarily fortunate to have a wonderful experience overall. And I think the reasons that I joined are distinctly different from the reasons that I stayed. Because the reasons that I joined were mostly, financially motivated, right? So I got a scholarship and I did a 4-year ROTC scholarship as an undergrad. And I honestly had no idea what I was getting into. I thought ROTC was like an extracurricular activity. I thought it was like joining the choir or something. Like I was just supposed to show up. I had no idea what I was doing. And then eventually I learned a little bit more and got pretty good at it, I suppose. And then went active duty right after graduation. But certainly those are not the reasons that I stayed because, that's a whole other question, I suppose. But generally speaking, you're no longer motivated by that type of money when you're dedicating your life to service.
I was in 12th grade for Gulf War I. So I was well past 10th grade by the time 9/11 happened. But I joined because of 9/11. And to Julia's point about staying, for me, the more important inflection point was after we were already involved in Iraq, I had to choose whether to stay or go. And I chose to stay, and I chose to become an infantry officer at that point because whether or not I believed in what we were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan, I believed in the service and the commitment that the people around me had made, and just believed that they deserved the best possible chance to come home from what they had volunteered to do.
And so transitioning to our next question, and I'll throw this one out for Stephanie. Why you chose your specific field of study, we'll say here at Michigan, and was that impacted in any ways by your service?
Definitely not. I was a freshman. I did my freshman year at University of Florida, and I was a computer engineering major there. During high school, I got into programming, and I joined after my freshman year. So for me, it was just like go back and finish what you started type of thing. Once I went to the reserves, and then continuing on with my master's. I've always been in engineering as far as like education goes.
I'm happy to jump in here. So right now I'm doing my PhD in industrial and operations engineering. It's an operations research track, which is mostly like applied math. And so that's all in pursuit of teaching in the Department of Systems Engineering at West Point, which really we try to tell the cadets that we teach there that it's about, basically taking information to make more well-informed decisions. And that's all you do as people in the military, is that you're balancing risks and trying to take all the information you have in order to make appropriate decisions. And so I found that as an engineer and as specifically in my field, that my education has been really helpful in that way. Not necessarily directly applied. My research is related to a data-driven approach to human trafficking. So I guess it's not really applicable, except it is finding bad guys, which, is part of our job as well. But generally speaking, I think it's that sort of critical analysis and critical thinking that's been really helpful to sort of transition between being an Army officer and then also being a researcher as well.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on this?
So not sure where to start the story to keep it brief, but I blogged my way through 3 deployments to Iraq, and I somehow during a seminar in my first year of the doctoral program, that fact came out, and the professor who would later become my advisor had a marginal comment about, soldiers in writing, what a great PhD that would be. It's a shame you weren't doing this back then. And thought to myself, it's not too late. So I started working on the subject of soldiers in writing. And after a while, it occurred to me that there's a field called military studies that thinks about the military in the abstract, what you would want a military for, what they would do in terms of defensive or offensive possibilities. And there's a field called veteran studies, which frequently tends to treat us as if we simply popped out of someone's forehead at the moment that we separated from the service. And in between, there's this enormous research gap about what it's like just to be in the military, what it is like to serve. And that's really where my dissertation came from, was the desire to try to fill in this gap by just talking to as many different service members as I could, as long as they were willing to sit still and listen to my questions, and then turn that into a document that offers possibilities, not definitive answers about what it means to serve, but to emphasize the fact that we all have a different story. There are possibilities there, and to try to encourage my audience to believe that it's worth asking us. What'd you do? Where'd you come from? Where'd you serve? And without focusing necessarily on the things that people always seem to gravitate to, like combat and trauma, but to focus on some of the things that all of us share: a commitment to training, a commitment to discipline, and a commitment to each other, to really intense relationships that most of us sincerely believe we aren't going to find anywhere else. So that's, in a nutshell, what I'm working on.
Got me all pumped now, Michael, so I'm gonna jump in here. I would think that I really have 3 takeaways that kind of linger with me now that I'm back in school. So one is that, so I was enlisted, and the military, so there's a lot of hurry up and wait in the Army. And so the military kind of taught me like to be able to grind through like the drudges of my degree program, law school, which is like a lot of grinding. just like forcing yourself to just sit there and pile through it and read and learn and over again, even when you don't want to. Another thing is that the military taught me to be resourceful, I think. So, you know, I would often end up in these situations where I'm being assigned to a task that like, I'm like, look, I'm a helicopter mechanic. Why am I changing a wheel on a tractor trailer or something like that? You know, it's like, well, you know, in the military, like you get to learn to do things, to like figure stuff out. And there's a lot of that going on, I think, in my program now. And I think the last thing is like the most important one is that the military kind of like taught me to not take things for granted. And so like, you know, being young at the time, like there's a lot of opportunity out in the world that I think people just like miss, and you know, for whatever reason. And the military, like after going back in, like it's what got me where I am now, I think, where like now I'm going to go clerk for a federal judge and I'm like doing really well in my program. I have like a job lined up, and it's like the military taught me to like be like raise your hand when a volunteer opportunity comes up, you know, like that's not like the approach that everybody takes, you know, I think, but and I didn't during my time in, to be quite frank. But now that I'm out, I'm like, okay, like this is, especially from my deployment, I was like, I'm not going to take things for granted like that anymore. And so I get that's what I learned from it, and how it's helped me in school.
Anyone else want to jump in on this question?
Paul, the question is, how did the service impact the field of academic study, or what skills did we take from the military that helped in the studies?
Yep, either or both.
So for me, I got pretty jacked up in Afghanistan, so I wasn't able to be in the field anymore. They put me in an office. So that was quite a hit to my ego there, but luckily my S3 chief made me get into school classes at lunchtime and then after work. So then during that time, I kind of sifted through and figured out what would be next for me, since I couldn't hook and jab anymore. And then I landed on business. I ended up becoming an entrepreneur before I came off of active duty. And then I was an entrepreneur when I moved back to Michigan. I was running 3 stores for my cousin, and then I got real bored. And like Matt, I found out I had these educational benefits. I said, well, how can I get better at this? And then it was before Helen's time there, but Michelle and Sarah at the Veteran Resources Center helped me just like really get into it. And it was that camaraderie that I know we all miss once we get out, that they kind of brought me back into a community. And that kind of helped me, you know, complete my studies in my undergrad, and then the decision to rematriculate and go back for a master's degree. That constant communication from the U of M people, just sending me different stuff saying, hey, would you like to participate in this and that? But I would say that that esprit de corps that you have in the military, it may not always be there, but when you do get surrounded by a community of good people who are doing good things, it brings it back front and center and allows you to kind of reintegrate into the population.
And I would say like being in the military, I think kind of be more mentally disciplined. You know, like reading really dry maintenance manuals for F-18s makes reading organizational theory books like seem very exciting. And tell me, sit down and just get it done. You know, I know before I was in the Navy and I was going to Eastern, like I would procrastinate, I wouldn't do the readings, and I think I took a lot of things for granted. And then kind of got say I got out, I realized all these great benefits I had, and I did not want to waste those things. I'd spent 4.5 years, serving for, and I got, but yeah, I guess definitely being mentally disciplined. When you're on a boat for 9 months, there's not a lot to go see or go do. So I did a lot of reading, of what previous, veterans did, and previous leaders and stuff. And one of those things they always talk about was being more disciplined, just personally being more disciplined. So that's why I think my biggest takeaway, and I moved that into my academic life. I never really would have thought 10 years ago, when I was just like an E2, that I'd be going for a master's degree. I just wanted to get out of the Navy, finish my degree, and just do something. But yeah, here I am. I'm a lot better student than I was, when I was 19 years old. Just going to parties, and stuff. And I take my academics a lot more serious. I take everything a lot more serious now. I think that's a lot to due to just serving in the military.
So I think, but I've heard in a lot of those responses was sort of the work ethic and sort of the tools to succeed in graduate school, which I think is great. And I've also heard, and I think Michael B. Alluded to this too, like the camaraderie while in the service. And so I was wondering if you could speak to sort of what was during your time in the military, speak to, the friendships formed and what kind of diversity you witnessed, and maybe how that might have differed or not differed once you transitioned out.
Well, Paul, for like, I guess the diversity in the community, like and I'm sure this is true across all branches, when you go to boot camp or you arrive to your first duty station or job school, you show up and it is, I mean, I was 19 when I joined the Marine Corps. Before that, I traveled out of state to go to college in Indiana, dropped out to join. And just the diversity of just all these different people from all these different places with all the different backgrounds. I mean, it wasn't overwhelming. It was just like drinking through a fire hose of just culture and diversity. And it really, you become a cosmopolitan, not overnight, but very quickly. You have all these experiences, all these people around you that, had I not joined the military, there's the discipline aspect, but also these shared experiences of, all the patriots around you that are doing things for good, and you get to see just all sorts of different socioeconomic backgrounds all in one place, and definitely have a different level of appreciation for what America actually is, like the fabric that really binds us.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like you get, you're probably like you said, I think all the branches. Like when I was in the Navy, we had guys from all over the world. We had people from Poland, in my shop, trying to become American citizens. And it's really unique, to meet people from Georgia who's 18, 19, and they're like, "Oh, you're from Michigan? I thought you were like from Canada or something." The way you sound, and then you do make some lifelong friendships. There's probably like 3 or 4 people like we text occasionally. I probably haven't seen them since I got out in 2014, but I could text them, tomorrow and be like, "Hey, like, what's going on?" Just like we saw each other yesterday. So there's always, you always have that kind of that core group of people you make those lifelong bonds with. And then I know that when I went back to school at University of Arizona, it was a little bit of a transition. I still had a lot of credits from Eastern, but I think I had 2 classes I had to take that were like the gen ed classes. So there I am, like with these 19, 18-year-old kids, and that was kind of like a little bit of a mind-blowing experience. But Arizona, kind of like Michigan, Eastern has a really good veterans center program, and then you meet guys instantly. Like I met one guy who was on the ship that relieved my ship, and you kind of can just, talk to people a little bit easier when you're up in the veterans area, and you have those kind of, regardless of the branch, you have that shared bond of just serving your country, whether it be for 3 or 4 years, or someone who's retired and they're just going back to school, trying to get their undergrad or something.
Yeah, and like piggybacking off what Rob said, I think for me anyway, like I moved every year that I was in, but I also knew people who like were at one station for like 14 years straight, right? So like there's just different experiences across the board, but I think there's this like shared, you understand that people leave, people go, and then you get busy, you stop talking, and like Rob said, you can just hit them up and talk to them like nothing happened. Like there's no hard feelings, there's no like, oh well, you haven't talked to me for however long. Like it's just part of being in the service. And I think that's one of the many shared experiences among people, is that you've moved around, or you've deployed, or whatever the case may be, that you knew this one person at this one time that you maybe worked with for a week before changeover or something, but you knew them. And then if they come across your life again, it's like, oh hi, like remember me, or what, like you can just continue from there. And I think that's a really nice thing to have. And I think that's kind of like, for me anyway, being an undergrad and then going into grad school, going through, okay, well, I have friends that I knew my first year here, and then they left, and then because they graduated, and then like the next set of people graduate and they leave. But then those are, again, there's these like shared experience of I knew them at one point or took a class with them, and so they're kind of always going to be in my life. And so that feeling, I think, and that's a really nice thing to have.
And Stephanie, kind of to piggyback on what you piggybacked on, today's the Marine Corps birthday. We are 245.
Happy birthday.
Well, thank you. But before I even got out of bed, I had text messages from 10 different people with cool little memes, different stuff like that. People I haven't talked to since this time last year. But I mean, it's been since I woke up this morning, I've talked to people in 20 different states, just real quick catch up and touch and go. And I'll talk to them again this time next year.
I'll jump in to add something to this. This is a little bit off topic, but kind of not. So I echo everything everybody else said. Like the camaraderie that you build, like with people that you're in the military with, there's nothing like it. Like that shared experience, it really teaches you like to see other people as people, I guess, is a crude way to put it. But one thing I think is really unique about your military experience is that like you can be instant friends with other people in the military that you've never met afterward. And I love that. Like when you're driving down the road and you see motorcycle people like put their hand down, like, hey, what's up? You know, like, what's up? It's the same thing. Like as soon as somebody knows, like another veteran knows that you're a veteran, it's like the veil is down. You're just instant cool with each other, you know? And that's something that I've never seen anything like it before.
Yeah, my husband's a civilian, and I try to explain it to him as because he's a big golfer. It's like when you meet another golfer. It's like the same thing.
So to follow up on that, so clearly, you have that camaraderie, during and then after when you see someone down the street or whatever, run into them at a party. But in terms of like camaraderie or forging bonds, like let's say in graduate school for the purposes of this discussion, is that something that was maybe difficult for you or just like different? Or I mean, I know everyone kind of came into graduate school in different ways here, but contrast or how sort of the bond is in some ways simpler when you're in the military. You have like this bond once you get through it, and then you get to graduate school where you might not have, folks that were in the military in your graduate program, for example, right? Especially if you're in a cohort-based program. So so can anyone speak to sort of what that experience was like? Did you have trouble with it, or maybe you didn't? You just, I'd love to hear some thoughts on that.
I have thoughts. I have all kinds of thoughts about that because it's connected to part of my dissertation. But the biggest thought I have is not mine. It comes from von Clausewitz, who said that soldiering is not complicated. The skills are not complicated. It is the circumstances under which you will execute those skills that is complicated. And that's, for the rifleman, that may be true. And there are any number of MOSs for which I suspect that's a good deal less true. But I think the fact remains that there are core skills that the military focuses on every single day. And one of the things that builds trust and builds camaraderie is the fact that you see everybody else publicly performing these skills all the time. You always know who's good at it, who's bad at it, but more importantly, you know who's trying and who isn't. And I mention this because, to me, I think one of the keys for a lot of us who are used to seeing this regular performance of core skills as a component of relationship and trust is that not every program puts these skills out on display. Seminars, the writing of papers, a lot of the regular work production of graduate school is really pretty individualistic. You aren't obviously in a classroom to bring everybody else up the way that you often feel you are in the military. The point of good performance, the point of a great PT session is not just that you did it right, but that you were bringing other people up with you when you did it. And it's a little harder to feel that in a graduate program, but I think it's possible. And so I guess, you know, since I have thought about this, one of the pieces of advice I might recommend is find ways to make that performance visible with your peers, whether it's just chatting through how they're writing, what they're writing. Just find ways to talk about those core skills and really share over it, because it won't, I'm not saying it's going to be like being in the military. You know, one of my key takeaways from my research so far has been that when people say there's nothing like it, it's not hyperbolic. It's genuine. There's really nothing like it. But I think that there are important takeaways. And one of them for me was just this regular performance, a public performance of core skills. Graduate schools don't make this easy to do, but I think we can still try to facilitate that at an individual level with our peers.
That's great. I really like those observations, Michael. If I could just add maybe a little bit to your original question, Paul, I think maybe putting a name to what you're talking about is sort of that concept of team building, which is something that's really all familiar to us, I think, from folks that have been in the military. And definitely those sort of like raw skills, I think, are very transferable from the military to any sort of group environment. I'm lucky in the sense that they, you know, in my department, they stick all the first year PhD students in one office, right? So we definitely have that sort of like cohort based sort of feel. And it's could not be a more diverse group of folks, right? We've got international students, we've got folks from all over the country, we got the old lady that's in there. And it has been, it's been really rewarding, I think, seeing that sort of forming, storming, norming sort of approach of the team coming together. And what Michael was saying, that sort of like public display of skills is a little bit more apparent when you're in a cohort with a group in an office. We're all taking the same class together. We have a whiteboard where we're doing work together and doing stuff. I think the part that maybe I contribute in that sort of team building component, what I've taken from the military into that cohort is that sort of like lifting each other up and keeping a positive attitude when everybody's down, or just trying to motivate people and that type of thing, even when I'm feeling bad. But I always 100% find that when I'm in the mindset, when I feel like as though I'm taking care of others, I'm always doing better myself, right? If I reverse that inwardly and I start thinking about myself and, oh gosh, this is so hard and I can't do this, then it always is 100% harder, rather than thinking like, oh, I'm actually like, let me see who needs some help today, or let me see if I can sort of bring this group together today around this problem that I'm having. And that always seems to work much better than me trying to go at it alone.
And Julia, I love that you talked about forming, norming, storming. So for those that are wondering, that's the Tuckman model of leadership. For those who are leadership nerds like me, I was like, that's Tuckman, that's awesome. So anyone else want to weigh on this before we transition to our next question?
Paul, I have just a saved round, I guess, for what I have noticed as far as like the teamwork or the team building. As far as I'm in my first semester, and so everything is COVID only meetings like this. So one of the benefits that I had was I've been doing Zoom meetings, GoTo meetings for years now. And so now I've been able to help, I guess, the rest of my classmates get familiar with the technology, use some of my business practices to, you know, I can schedule a team of 6 to get on the same page for a meeting in under 2 hours by showing them some things that have worked for me in business. But it's really like, you know, the Michigan model is the team is saying, okay, well, I recognize all these people, different strokes and different ability levels. And then the absolute team performance is what I'm setting out for every time, and saying like, okay, well, what do I know that I can impart on these folks to just start getting other gems? And I found that by sharing just what little tidbits I do bring to the group that are special, that the Jolly Ranchers, that's how we say it in Marine Corps martial arts, the Jolly Ranchers that you get back are just incredible. And case in point, I have a finance class. We're doing a group project with 6 of us. Alphabetically, I ended up as the team leader for it and scheduled the meeting, got everybody on the same page, and then we were inside of a Google Sheets, and I said like 1 or 2 things. Okay, I think we should do this. I think we should do that. And then just like the team just built out an entire database for what we needed to do. And I like, it was appearing in front of my eyes. I've never had that experience before. So it's the teamwork that's available, I guess, in this environment. It's much different, but it's, there's a certain level of satisfaction that comes with being able to work with, there's people all over the state or the country right now in this meeting. To be able to collaborate in this manner is definitely fulfilling.
So I was looking at my questions and how do I want to transition from that? So on this call or on this meeting, and of course, those that will watch it in replay will be professors, administrators, staff members, and other students as well. And for me as a college administrator, you go to conferences, they always talk about how to support different populations. So there's entire institutes on how to serve student veterans. But I like to hear it from your perspective, for student veterans coming into college, right? Graduate program, especially a graduate program. What do you think is essential to help support your success in graduate school? And you can be creative. I'll give you an unlimited budget.
I think besides free printing, I know when I first went to school, it was out of high school to Eastern. There really wasn't a veterans resource office there in 2004, 2005. Then when I got out of the Navy, went to Arizona. Arizona had a nice one. Eastern's got one. I think just having that office for veterans to go to, be around other veterans, just having a kind of a space they can relax, study if they want, really focus. And I know at Eastern, and it's same thing, I'm sure Michigan same. We had free printing for veterans to use the copy, because I'm printing off books a day for public administration. But I think just having that resource, that room and resource, and having a former veteran who runs the office, so you can kind of lean on it. Hey, what did you do, for your career? Or kind of get advice from that. And having undergrad veterans there, they look up to the graduates. Hey, did you take this class when you were an undergrad? How's professor? What reading did you do? And even in my program, there was another veteran who's in the MPA program over here at Eastern. And we talked to each other. We're always emailing each other, hey, what format did you use for this? So I think just having the office so all veterans can kind of come together, we can meet each other and kind of lean on each other when we need it. But yeah, that's I think that's the biggest thing, is just having that veteran center for, where we could just come in, eat our lunch, even if that. And because a lot of times, when veterans come back, when I came back to school, it was kind of like a shock. Like, here I am, late 20s, early 30s, and there's a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds, not acting how I'm acting, but just kind of getting away from that and just being with more people who have that kind of shared experiences we talked about earlier.
I'll piggyback. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just thanking him. Go.
Okay. So I agree so much with you, Rob. I think those resources out there really make a huge difference in a veteran's educational success. And I think in addition to that is that social network, being able to know, being a veteran can be isolating. And so after your military service, and it's important, school is not easy, right? It's just not. And so in these sorts of stressful times, it's good to have somebody that understands what you've been through, to be able to share those experiences with. And I guess a caveat to that is that since professors and such are listening, I would say, the one thing that you could do personally, maybe for a veteran, is to try to understand that like someone's military service doesn't necessarily like make them the person that they are, but like improves the person that they like probably already were. It, like you're not veteran, like that's not like what you know, like it's not like one thing. And so like being able to understand like just because I'm a veteran doesn't mean like I'm not a person, you know. And so being able to understand like, look, they go through hard stuff too, you know. They have thoughts and emotions and difficulties and stuff like that. I think really helps bridge the gap to make veteran students, like I've talked to a lot of them. You know, I was in the military veterans, the president of the military veterans organization at the law school this last year, and like veterans feel isolated in post-secondary education. I don't know like all of them, I'm not speaking for everybody, but it's there. And so, you know, building that, facilitating that environment in which like they can find each other or just other people is like very, very healthy, I think.
Those were the two things that I had come up to
Sorry.
with two. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Rob.
No, I was gonna say, Matt, I think about a really good point, like how some people just view us as like one dimensional, like we're just veterans, like that's all they see. And I think that's a very good, you know, point you brought up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to just reinforce was just, you know, aside from having a shared space, which would be wonderful. And I think, I don't want to step on your toes, Phil, but I want to say that there's some sort of initiative in order to try to kick something off with some sort of shared space. And that's also based on some feedback I've gotten from other folks that go to larger universities where there is like a very vibrant sort of veteran presence talking about like, you know, the potential of having a shared space and what, you know, you could do all kinds of things with that. And then beyond that, I would say, you know, just like a recognition that there's sort of like no one size fits all sort of definition of a veteran. Obviously, we don't all look the same. We don't all come from the same backgrounds. And that, you know, we're as individual as as all the other rest of the students. And so I think that's that sort of recognition and understanding I have definitely experienced here at Michigan. I've been extremely impressed by all the faculty and, you know, just how welcoming everyone has been. So no complaints on my part for so far, but I think it would be a great way to have sort of like a space, you know, as a parent that's also an older sort of student, maybe non-traditional, it'd be great to just have like access to those resources that I have available to me as well as a parent. So that's all.
And one of the cool things for my undergrad at Flint, the Veteran Resources Office at Flint, many of you probably spent time in the barracks where you have that second deck lounge or whatever you guys have. Flint did a really good job. It was being built, I don't know, 2013, 14, something like that. But I mean, the lounge or the Veterans Resource Office, whatever, I just call it the lounge. The lounge at Flint is incredible. It kind of replicates that experience of being in the barracks with, you know, you have nothing to do all day, go train in the lounge. But the camaraderie that you get in that environment where that was my first exposure really to, I mean, we had Navy corpsmen with us, but like the Air Force and Army guys from the different backgrounds, it was a real nice melting pot of all the different branches, and just it really opened my eyes to how large a game we were playing as the military, not just the Marine Corps at that point. But that was something. I mean, they have couches, fridges, microwaves, free printing on the computers, Rob. But I mean, it was just a really nice thing when they built that thing out. That definitely enhanced my experience 100%.
And if I could add a couple things, something just that I've noticed since COVID happened last semester, in the winter semester, I would say like being respectful of students' time and like being aware of disabilities within students. And that goes not just for veterans, but for like all students in general, and non-traditional students too, right? So veterans are usually older, they have families, they have other stuff. So like I remember when we first went remote, last semester, I had back-to-back classes, and you have like your 10-minute time period between classes, and that's where, you know, you would physically go to a class. And one of my professors was like, oh, well, you guys don't have to go anywhere, so we can just keep going until like the top of the hour. And I mean, yes, but like, what if you have children that you need to go look at for real quick? You know, like, it's just so many things that I don't think some professors like realize or recognize. And that can also be like a mental health thing too, right? Like, has the student been like on the computer for hours upon hours, back to back? And then I would say disabilities too, just the fact that some of them can be completely invisible, and just because they're a good student, just because they're outspoken, just because they're participating, doesn't mean that they don't have something else. And so if like they give you accommodations paperwork, like take that seriously and actually accommodate them, not just like, you know, oh, everybody can just do the same or whatever the case may be. But I think those have been highlighted in general for me anyway, like what I've noticed with myself and my, like just talking to my peers, have been just coming up during the COVID times, which I understand it's unprecedented and all that good stuff, but I think it's something good to just keep in mind as we continue on whatever's going to happen in the future.
Stephanie's point, I think, is especially apt because it's a bridge between some of the institution level interventions that other people have been talking about and the problem of individual relationships with specific professors, specific mentors, specific peers on campus. It sometimes occurred to me that I would prefer, when talking with a professor or talking with anybody on campus, if you are not ready to talk to me about what my veteran experiences, what my military experiences were like, I would prefer that we just pretend they're not there, in the same way that you would pretend that somebody else's previous experience as a bookseller or a grocery stocker just doesn't really seem to matter in this space. But if you are going to regard me as a veteran, I would like you to engage in that. Not merely as a one-off transaction, but as an ongoing process of learning what it is like. And to go back to my refrain about it's not like anything else, being in the military is formative in a way that nothing else really is. And it does actually matter very much to who we are as people, as students, as parents. And that's not to say that other people's previous life experiences therefore matter less, but there is a centrality about the way that matters for many veterans. And it is something which, especially if you're a mentor or a professor at the university, if you are going to engage, you're in for a bit of a ride. There's not really any way around that. And that's something that I would want people to know, is that it will not be easy, and it will be immeasurably valuable for both you and the veteran that you engage with, to really understand that we are not what you imagined we would be like. I have been faced with any number of bizarre workplace assumptions because I was in the military about my capacity to take orders, my capacity to give orders. And I frequently said to people, especially when they simply expect me to take orders, I said, you are about to join a long list of very disappointed bosses. So let's get this out of the way. I was never very good at taking orders, and I'm sorry about that, but it's just not going to happen. And I would want, and I suppose, this should sound similar to what I had to say about the dissertation. At the end of the day, what I want people to do here at the university and everywhere is, if you're going to engage someone as a veteran, be ready to have a long conversation about what that means and where they're coming from, and be ready for them to return the favor and listen to you.
That's powerful. And I think the last question I had is, what would you like, professors and others at the university to, if they could understand one thing about veterans, what would it be? Michael, I think from your perspective, you definitely you answered that question. And I think many of you answered that question in the last few minutes in your own way. But if anyone wants to add to that, maybe give us the Twitter version, of what's the one thing you would want people to walk away with? Does anyone want to sort of add to that before we go to Q&A and open it up?
Paul, I can add to a little bit. This is something that I found, Michael. I'm happy to answer any question anybody has for me, but at the end of the day, people tend to shoot the messenger. Once I give you a peek behind the curtain, it might mess your day up for whatever reason. But the question I always ask people to ask themselves and say, look, I'm open to answer any question you have within reason. But why do you want to know that? If you don't know why you want to know that, you probably shouldn't be asking those questions. That's my Twitter version.
All right, I am looking. So if anyone wants to add to it, add. But now, if people want to open up their mics or throw your question in the chat box for our panel, now is the time. So yeah, let's give it a couple minutes, and we welcome additional questions for our panel. And if for some reason you're having trouble unmuting your mic, let me know and I'll make sure it happens. But you should all have the ability to unmute yourselves as well.
While we're waiting, I kind of answer your last question real quick, and it kind of goes back to what Julia said earlier. So that not every veteran joined for the same reason. Like, I mean, obviously we love our country, want to serve our nation, but for a lot of veterans, that wasn't like the main reason they joined. Maybe because they wanted a job or they wanted to go see someplace. Like, so be prepared. If you ask somebody why you joined the military, you might not get the answer that you're expecting to hear back.
Hi, maybe you can ask a quick one. I'm an advisor, and a number of the students I work with are veterans. Phil, hello. And sometimes I try to see if I can incorporate that into it. Like if they're working in their design teams, I talk to them about, well, you're very loyal to your teams in the military, so I see you're using the same loyalty here. And I think the answer is going to be every veteran is different, but how to figure out is whether this is something they want me to weave in or whether they don't ever want to talk about it again. Like, what are the tells? How should I be reading that to say how best to support them? Thank you.
Just be direct.
Meaning what?
Well, you should never ask permission to ask a question to ask another question. Just if it's on your mind, there's something going on where you want to know something, just be direct. I mean, like we're used to a level of communication that most people aren't comfortable with. So even if the answer is no, I don't ever want to talk to you about that, Susan, we'll have type of candor after you feeling comfortable enough to ask that. It's an individual comfortableness on the communicator A as well as B. So even if the answer is no, just knowing that communication bridge is open, that goes both ways. So I always ask the question if you have it.
Okay. Be direct, is that what I'm hearing? That's what people are nodding. Okay.
It sounds like from the description that this is also a conversation that happens one-on-one with your advisees. And I would recommend that you continue with that. There are a lot of veterans who are not comfortable with disclosure of their status and do not like to be outed. We are not
no, I would never do that.
Yeah,
No.
We're not representative because we all showed up for this.
No,
But
I understand.
I just, preaching to the choir.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because there's one that was very excited about this week and one that I knew from previous years doesn't want to hear anything about this week, right? So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I would say timing too. Hi, Dr. Montgomery.
Hi, Stephanie.
Just in general, you don't know what the triggers would be with even the simplest question. So I would think about the timing of things, just in case.
Meaning what?
You're saying you have one-on-one sessions, which is great, right?
Yeah.
But one-on-one the day before an exam or something, like, something like that. You just in
Okay.
general, you want to make
Sure.
sure what's going on in their life, so you're not gonna accidentally trip something up.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Keonta McKinley. I'm a graduate student. I'm getting my master's in social work. And one of my career goals is to eventually work with vets in like a mental health setting. But however, I'm a civilian. Like I have family members that are active duty or veterans, so I know some of their experiences. But from your perspective, are there any resources I should look into so I can better get understanding about the military, or kind of like what does that look like? So when I do go into these sessions and having these therapy sessions, I kind of know a background. So when I'm with my client or with my patient, it's not necessarily me asking questions for them to kind of teach me about the military. So when I go into those sessions, I kind of already have an idea. So it's not like, I don't want them to have to like relive trauma or like relive their experiences, where it's supposed to be kind of a session where we're kind of working together and I can help them in a way. So if there's any resources you guys kind of have in mind that I should probably look into just to expand my knowledge on military so I can be a better healthcare provider.
Keontae, if I could just jump in here real quick. First of all, I just want to applaud your decision to do that. Thank you so much. It's not regularly that I run into someone that wants to use their education to work with veterans. And just, yeah, thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. I don't have much to add other than a laundry list of books that I'm happy to put in the chat, or I can send you an email or something, but I think you should read Michael Hoffman's dissertation, because it sounds like that's going to be a pretty good lead into understanding a veteran. But yeah, I'm sure some other folks will have some good suggestions.
Thank you.
There's something in the chat as well. If you want to read that, I think that's for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, and what's in the chat says Star Behavioral Health Providers teaches military cultural competency to therapists. So thank you to Jennifer for providing that as well.
I've got something to offer here for you as well. And in a more informal way is, I don't know how much time you have or what it seems like this is your program of study. So maybe you would want to spend some time going down this route, but there are resources out there that aren't so formal. Like you can look up YouTube videos that soldiers post of like their experiences, like on base doing different tasks that they think are menial, or making jokes. Soldiers spend a lot of time doing this kind of stuff. There's a Vet TV channel now that is specifically designed for the kind of humor that appeals to people with a military experience. And these kinds of things, like to watch them, I think will really provide a lot of insight for, brace yourself, because it does not hold its punches. I will be honest with you. But yeah, I think like if you really want to know a little bit more about, what do veterans think is funny, like what does their day look like and what's their perception of that, these are some kind of more informal resources. And then as a final point to that is, don't be afraid to ask. I think like kind of like what some others were saying is like, I think veterans appreciate, for the most part, candor. And so like, if you have a question about like, oh, I heard about this experience or something like this, like, don't be afraid to ask. Like you said, you have family members and other veteran resources. I think veterans are generally like willing to talk about like kind of we said, like their perspective on like military stuff. And so, yeah, I think those are some really good avenues for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Keontae, if you don't mind my asking, what year are you in your program at the School of Social Work?
So interesting getting asked that question. So I'm a first year. However, I got my bachelor's in social work. So I'm doing the advanced standing program, which is only a year. So I always tell people it's my first and only year. So I graduate next year in July.
Oh, wow. That's a fast. I'll tell you, I see your email in the chat. I was going to offer to send a couple names of faculty in the School of Social Work who I think would be really good to talk to because that's what they do.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
They might be names that you already have. But beyond that, if a literature of talking to veterans interests you, take seriously the possibility that you can make that yourself. and
Okay.
lots and lots of people will thank you for it.
Got it. Perfect. Thank
Sure.
you so much.
I'll just chime in real quick. There is also a group of students who are getting their master's degrees in social work who are veterans as well. So not only finding some faculty, but there are some peers out there who can relate it from you as a student, kind of gaining knowledge and potentially going into VA or other service working with veterans who are doing the exact same thing, but also have that military experience that you're looking for. So I know I know a lot of social work folks. I have a lot of them in my family and friends, and you speak kind of your own language too, along with military kind of social. There's a social work language, and so they can translate pretty well, I think, for you.
Okay, perfect. I'll definitely look into that. Thank you.
And just contact me if you want. I can send that out on your behalf and see if they want to contact you.
Okay, perfect. I will definitely get in touch with you.
Who's next on the screaming chat?
Hi, so I have a question. But first, before I get to my question, I just want to thank everyone for coming out here because Zoom fatigue is very real. And so since everyone's busy and all, I'm just really grateful. So I'm in my final year of nursing school here at U of M. And I've been doing a lot of backwards planning lately because I am in my senior year. I want to fulfill my service obligation as an Army officer before going to grad school. And though the current idea of pursuing a degree is very appealing for me right now, I understand that as life progresses, plans could change. So I was wondering if you could speak to how you maintain your commitment to your educational goals while you were fulfilling your service obligations. That would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, Deborah, I can talk a little bit about my experience being, I'm still active duty, and when I'm done with my PhD, this will be the 4th degree I have on the Army's dime. So at some point, I'm going to monetize that. But in the meantime, I'm still under lock and key with them. But no, that's a joke for anyone else that's listening. But yeah, so I think for me personally, when I finished my junior officer years, it was always in the back of my mind. I knew I always wanted to get I always wanted to get a graduate degree. And so for me at the time, one of the easiest ways to do that was to get a master's degree and to go teach at the academy as my utilization tour. There's all different types of ways to do that in the Army and in the military. There's so many different routes to do that. And so once you sort of start that inertia of in order for me to do that, I need to then backwards plan my, you're saying, your gates of I've got to have this job and have this job before I apply for this thing. And so, and that inertia is sort of just kind of what keeps you going and saying okay, this is something that I want to do. That means I have to, for me personally, I have to then apply to go teach at West Point, which then after that I need to apply to graduate schools. Okay, then I have to, so that whole process might take 2 to 3 years. So you kind of have this sort of inertia moving forward. And then when I left teaching there the first time, I never in a million years would have thought I'd go back. I saw it in my rearview mirror. I was like, see you later, people. Never going back to academia. I'll never take a test again. Ha ha ha. Famous last words. But yeah, so I think, so for me personally, I think it's just been sort of setting that goal and then sort of ticking off your milestones as you reach each one of them and just knowing hey, this is something that I'm internally driven. And I will also say as a warning, and some of you all could probably attest to this as well, as each of you have probably getting ready to go out, you will also encounter some resistance, right? Because you're going to have leaders that think it's not a great idea. Hey, you've got so much potential. Why would you get out of X? Hey, I've got this job X lined up for you. Why would you leave now? And so you will encounter some resistance, I think, and that's just natural because especially if you're doing a job, they're going to want to keep you around. And so, so just kind of, I think, keeping your eye on that goal and making sure that you're sort of fiercely defending it is probably is going to test whether or not you really want it.
Was there a point where some of the milestones that you had for yourself weren't achieved during your process, and how are you able to like overcome that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't want to bore everyone else with this stuff, but 100%. Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely milestones along the way that were not achieved. I can tell you now, this is 22 plus years in the Army, that if I lined up every success I've had in the Army, I can probably draw a straight line to some sort of perceived failure, like something I think I had done wrong, or I had somehow gotten a job where I'm like, oh gosh, what am I doing here? And if I hadn't had that job, it wouldn't have given me the right steps to get to that particular success. And I can probably draw a line to each one of my perceived failures to some success, and some success back to one of my perceived failures. So yeah, absolutely. But you know, that's sort of like the bumpy road that it takes. But then again, if you are able to then hang on to that goal, then it makes it that much more rewarding and satisfying.
Thank you so much.
I just want to real quick add to this. Not any stories. I think you put it perfectly. This is more like a resources. I don't know if you've ever heard of Service to School. Reaching out to that before you pursue your graduate program may connect you also with some people that like it's a free run by veterans service that like other veterans like will help you get into a graduate degree program, and may help you like guide you and mentor you along that process as well to alleviate some of that burden, give you advice and stuff like that along the way.
That's great.
I'm
And
sorry, what was that called again? Can you put the title of that in the chat? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll post the link right now too for you.
and then I would say also be transparent with your superiors about what, you know, it looks like you already kind of have this, oh, I want to do this eventually. So let that be known in the beginning, because they'll be able to guide you, hopefully, if you have a really good supervisor. And then keep track of the deadlines, especially if you're going to go through programs with the military. A lot of programs are like once a year. So last thing you want to do is like not meet a deadline, have to wait a whole nother year just to apply for something. So keep that in mind.
Well, I think with that, we are at time. So I want to thank all of our panelists. Let's give them a virtual round of applause and thumbs up and all that other good stuff. And we will stick around if we're able after this to answer any additional questions and continue the conversation. But thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to our panelists for your insight and sharing your experiences. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of Veterans Week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul, for doing this. We appreciate it very, very much.
Anytime.
Panelists, you were excellent today. So thank you so much for all the insight. Wow, there was a lot. We could continue this on for another hour in discussion.